The forest was silent, but his ragged breath echoed in the cold night air. Abandoned, alone, he had to survive. What he did next will shatter your heart. The wind howled through the dense forest, rattling the brittle branches of trees that stretched toward the night sky like skeletal fingers. The leaves, damp with the residue of an earlier rain, clung to the earth beneath a restless set of paws. A lone German shepherd stood amidst the towering pines, his coat bristling in the cold. His deep brown eyes darted toward every shifting shadow, every unfamiliar noise. He was alone, utterly, heartbreakingly alone. For as long as he could remember, he had been someone's dog. A companion, a protector, a friend. His name had once meant something, spoken in a voice that carried love and belonging. But now, there was only silence. The last thing he remembered was the car door slamming, the whimper that escaped his throat as tires kicked up dirt and gravel, the taillights disappearing into the distance. He had chased until his legs gave out, until his paws bled against the rough terrain. And then, nothing. His name was Rex, a name once called with affection, now an echo in his own mind. For days he had wandered, searching for any sign of his family, his home, the scent that would lead him back. Hunger gnawed at his belly like an unrelenting beast. The water in the puddles tasted of decay, and his body ached from the cold that settled into his bones. But Rex had not always been just another dog. He had been more. Born into a litter of strong, intelligent pups, he had been chosen, trained, molded into something exceptional. His owner, Daniel, had seen his potential from the very beginning. A former soldier, Daniel had sought a companion, not just a pet, but a partner. Rex had learned the language of discipline, of purpose. He had protected Daniel through thick and thin, his loyalty as unshakable as the mountains. They had spent years together, through lonely nights and quiet dawns, through whispered commands and unbreakable trust. Rex had been at Daniel's side during the hardest moments of his life, offering his silent, unwavering presence. He had seen the pain behind his owner's eyes, the struggles that weighed heavily on his heart, and in return, Daniel had given Rex something no amount of training could teach: love. Then one day, everything changed. The world as Rex knew it unraveled in an instant. The home that smelled of safety and warmth became a distant memory. The hands that had once scratched behind his ears, the voice that had whispered praise in the darkness, they were gone. He did not know why. He did not understand. All he knew was that he had been left. The forest was different from anything he had ever known. It smelled of damp earth, of hidden dangers lurking just beyond sight. He was no longer the trained protector, no longer the dog with purpose. Out here, he was nothing more than a shadow in the wilderness, a creature fighting to stay alive. But Rex was not a dog who gave up easily. On his first night alone, the hunger had been unbearable. He had been trained to track, to follow orders, but now he had only his instincts to rely on. His stomach clawed at him, demanding food, but there was nothing except the whispering trees and the unending darkness. He had curled up beneath a thick, moss-covered log, his body trembling from the chill that seeped into his bones. Sleep had come in brief, restless moments, always interrupted by the rustling of unseen creatures, the snapping of twigs that sent his heart racing. By the second day, he had begun to understand the true meaning of abandonment. He had followed the road at first, his nose to the ground, searching for the familiar scent of oil and dust, of the tires that had carried his owner away. But the road was empty, stretching on forever with no sign of Daniel, no trace of home. Eventually, hunger drove him into the woods. His muscles, once strong and trained, ached with fatigue. He had once been fed the best meals, nutrient-packed kibble, cooked meat, the occasional treat that Daniel had given him with a chuckle and a scratch behind the ears. Now, he was reduced to scavenging, his powerful nose searching for anything remotely edible. The first time he caught a rabbit's scent, something ancient awoke in him. the hunter, the survivor. He had tracked the small creature for nearly an hour, every step calculated, every muscle taut with anticipation. But he was not fast enough. The rabbit had disappeared into the underbrush in a blur of fur and fear, leaving Rex panting, defeated. He had never known failure like this before. By the third day, his body had begun to betray him. His ribs pressed against his skin, his legs felt weak beneath him. The thirst was worse than the hunger. His tongue felt swollen, his throat like sandpaper. The puddles of water he found were tainted, murky with decay. He drank anyway, his instincts overriding his training. He missed Daniel's voice. He missed the way his owner had run his fingers through his fur after a long day, the way he had spoken to him, not as a dog, but as a partner. He missed the warmth of their small home, the scent of old leather and gun oil, the sound of boots on the wooden floor. But what hurt the most was the betrayal. Daniel had always told him they were a team, that no matter what, they would always have each other. So why had he left? Rex didn't know if he had done something wrong. He had obeyed every command, had stayed by Daniel's side through everything. And yet, in the end, it hadn't been enough. As the days bled into each other, Rex became something else. He was no longer just a dog searching for his owner. He was something primal now, a creature of the wild, learning how to survive by necessity. He learned to move silently through the trees, his paws barely making a sound against the damp earth. He learned the scent of danger, the rust-covered tang of a fox that had stalked him from the shadows. He had fought for food, snarling over scraps left behind by larger predators, his body growing leaner, harder. But deep inside, beneath the hunger and the cold, beneath the instincts that were slowly taking over, something remained. Hope. Because somewhere, deep down, a part of him still believed that the road would lead him home, believed that one day his name would be called again, and when that day came, he would be ready. The night had swallowed the forest whole, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the occasional rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush. The cold pressed in from all sides, wrapping itself around Rex like an unrelenting grip. Hunger had become a dull ache, a companion as familiar as his own shadow. His ribs were beginning to show beneath his thick coat, and his once powerful legs felt weaker with every passing hour. But the worst of it wasn't the hunger. It was the loneliness. For 3 days, he had not heard a human voice. Not the sound of boots crunching against gravel, not the gentle murmur of someone calling his name. The silence was suffocating. Then, on the 4th night, something changed. Rex had been curled beneath the roots of an ancient tree, his body curled tight to preserve what little warmth he had left. His ears twitched at the distant sound of something unnatural. A low hum, a mechanical growl cutting through the night air. His head snapped up, ears pricked forward. His heart pounded. A car. He scrambled to his feet, muscles trembling from exhaustion, but fueled by something stronger than hunger. Hope. The sound grew louder, tires crunching against gravel, an engine roaring in the distance. Without hesitation, Rex took off, his paws kicking up dirt as he ran toward the noise. The road. If there was a car, that meant people. And if there were people, maybe Daniel had come back. His body screamed in protest, but he ran faster, leaping over fallen branches and tearing through the undergrowth, his breath coming in harsh pants. The closer he got, the more his heart raced. Then, just beyond the clearing, he saw it. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the road like a beacon in the night. The car, an old pickup, was moving slowly, rolling to a stop just a few feet away. Rex skidded to a halt at the edge of the trees, his chest heaving, his ears pinned back. His mind screamed at him to run forward, to throw himself at the car, to bark, to cry, to do anything that would make them stop and see him. But something held him back. The scent of cigarette smoke, the faint stench of alcohol. Not Daniel. His tail lowered slightly as he watched from the shadows. 2 men stepped out of the truck, their boots crunching against the gravel. One of them, tall, burly, with a thick beard and a stained jacket, sighed heavily and slammed the door shut. "This is as good a place as any," the man muttered, tossing a cigarette to the ground and crushing it beneath his boot. The second man, younger and thinner, hesitated. "You sure about this? You want to keep driving all night?" The older man scoffed. "He ain't our problem no more, just get him out." Rex stiffened. He saw it then. A shape in the truck's back seat. Small. Frail. A boy. The child couldn't have been older than 6 or 7, his clothes tattered, his face smeared with dirt. He sat stiffly, his hands gripping a tattered blanket as he stared out the window with wide, terrified eyes. The younger man sighed and reached for the door handle. "Come on, kid. Out." The boy didn't move. Rex felt his heartbeat thunder in his ears. The older man's patience wore thin. "Get him out, or I swear to God—" The younger man muttered something under his breath, then reached inside and grabbed the boy's arm. The child let out a small, choked whimper as he was dragged from the truck and set roughly onto the road. The cold night air rushed around them, and the boy shivered. "Don't just stand there," the older man grunted. "Get moving." The boy didn't move. Rex saw it all. Saw the way the child's small hands trembled, the way his bare feet barely held him upright. He saw the tears brimming in his wide, terrified eyes. Something inside Rex snapped. With a deep, guttural growl, he stepped out of the shadows. The men didn't notice him at first. The boy did. His eyes darted toward Rex, and for a split second, something flickered across his face. Hope, maybe, or fear, or something in between. Then, the older man turned. "What the?" Rex growled louder, his lips pulling back to reveal sharp, gleaming teeth. The older man took a step back, his hand instinctively moving to the pocket of his jacket. The younger one stiffened. "Where the hell did that thing come from?" Rex took another step forward, his claws digging into the gravel. His growl rumbled deep in his chest, a warning. He didn't know this boy, but he knew one thing for certain. No one was going to hurt him. The older man let out a frustrated breath. "Damn mutt." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a rusted pocket knife. "Ain't got time for this." Rex's muscles coiled, ready to strike. The boy made a sound then, a small broken whimper that made something deep inside Rex twist. Without thinking, he lunged. The movement was swift, a blur of fur and fury. He didn't aim to kill, just to warn. His jaws snapped just inches from the man's outstretched arm, his bark sharp and commanding. The older man stumbled back, cursing. "Jesus Christ." "Forget it!" the younger man shouted, grabbing his arm. "Let's just go." The older man hesitated, his grip tightening around the knife. Rex growled again, stepping between them and the boy. A standoff. The older man glared at Rex, then at the child. "Damn kid ain't worth the trouble." He spat onto the ground, shoving the knife back into his pocket. "Let's get out of here." Rex didn't move as the men stomped back to the truck. The older one shot him a final glare before climbing into the driver's seat. The younger man hesitated, just for a moment, then followed. The truck roared to life, tires spinning against the gravel as it sped off down the road, kicking up dust in its wake. And then, silence. Rex turned slowly. The boy stood frozen, his small frame trembling. He stared at Rex, his lips parted as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, cautiously, the boy knelt. A tiny shaking hand reached forward. Rex hesitated. He had trusted before. He had believed before. And it had left him lost and alone. But this boy, this child abandoned in the cold, he was just like him. Hesitantly, Rex took a step closer. The boy didn't flinch. Rex took another step. The boy sniffled, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Do you have a name?" he whispered. Rex's ears twitched. For the first time in days, he felt something other than hunger, other than exhaustion. He felt purpose. "You can stay with me," the boy murmured. "If you want." Rex exhaled slowly. And then, he did something he hadn't done in days. He stepped forward, just enough to press his nose against the boy's palm. The child let out a small, shuddering breath. And then, in the middle of the cold, lonely road, Rex made a choice. He would not be alone anymore. He would protect this boy. No matter what. The boy reached out further. His fingers brushed against Rex's fur, tentative and light. The road stretched endlessly into the night, swallowed by the thick darkness of the forest on either side. The boy sat on the cold gravel, his small body trembling, his thin arms wrapped around himself in a desperate attempt to preserve warmth. The last remnants of the truck's red taillights had vanished minutes ago, but the feeling of abandonment lingered like a wound that refused to heal. Rex sat beside him, his breath slow but watchful, his ears twitching at every distant sound. The boy's scent was one of fear, salt, and exhaustion, a heartbreaking mix that made something deep inside the dog tighten. The boy was like him now, alone, left behind. For a moment, neither moved. Then, in a voice so small it barely broke through the night, the boy whispered, "Are they coming back?" Rex didn't understand words the way humans did, but he recognized tone. The quiver in the boy's voice, the way his breath hitched between syllables. Hope still clung to him, fragile and desperate. Rex let out a quiet whine. The boy swallowed hard, lowering his head. "Yeah," he mumbled. "Didn't think so." A gust of wind howled through the trees, rustling the dry leaves across the ground. The boy shivered violently, pulling his thin jacket tighter around himself. It was too light for the cold. His shoes were thin, barely holding together. His hands, small, bony, were rubbed raw, his fingertips red and cracked. He wasn't going to last long out here. Rex knew cold. He had spent days curled up in the underbrush, his body shivering until exhaustion forced him into uneasy sleep. But the boy, he wasn't built for this. He was fragile, like a pup separated from the warmth of his mother. The dog nudged him gently. The boy sniffled, looking up through damp lashes. "What?" Rex nudged him again, then turned, stepping off the gravel road and into the forest. He paused, looking back. "Come." The boy hesitated, hugging his arms tighter to his chest. His eyes darted toward the road, scanning the darkness as though he still expected the truck to reappear. It wouldn't. After a moment, he exhaled shakily and pushed himself to his feet. His legs wobbled, but he followed. Rex led him into the trees, stepping carefully over thick roots and damp earth. The forest swallowed them whole, the sounds of the wind and distant owls pressing in around them. But it was better than the road. Here, they were hidden. Safe. The boy stumbled over a root, letting out a soft yelp as he caught himself. Rex immediately turned back, pressing against the boy's leg to steady him. "You're smart, huh?" the boy whispered. His voice was hoarse, strained. "You know how to survive out here?" Rex didn't answer, but he nudged the boy forward again. A few minutes later, they reached a small clearing where a thick tree had fallen, its massive roots upturned, leaving behind a small hollow space beneath the exposed earth. It smelled of damp moss and decay, but it would do. The boy hesitated, looking around. "Where are we?" Rex sniffed at the hollow, then pawed at the earth, making the space larger before stepping inside. He circled once, then settled down, his thick fur bristling as the wind picked up again. He turned his head toward the boy. "Come." The child hesitated again, glancing over his shoulder as though the road might call him back. Then, finally, he took a step forward. Slowly, cautiously, he crawled into the hollow and curled up beside Rex. His breathing was uneven, his body stiff. But when Rex shifted closer, pressing his warmth against the boy's side, the child let out a long, shuddering breath. For the first time that night, he relaxed. The boy barely slept. Every few minutes he twitched, shivered, or jerked awake with a gasp. Sometimes he muttered in his sleep. Words Rex didn't understand, but felt the pain behind. Rex kept his head raised, listening to the night, watching the shadows shift beyond the hollow. His body ached, his stomach twisted with hunger, but he didn't close his eyes. The boy needed him. When dawn finally crept into the sky, breaking through the trees in soft streaks of gold, the boy stirred again. His breath was shaky as he rubbed his face with stiff, numb fingers. He turned his head, meeting Rex's gaze. "You're still here," he murmured. His voice was rough with exhaustion, but there was something else now, something softer. "You didn't leave." Rex thumped his tail against the dirt. The boy sat up slowly, stretching his sore limbs. He let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his messy hair. "We gotta find food," he mumbled. At the word food, Rex's ears perked. His stomach growled in agreement. The boy glanced at him, managing a tiny, weak smile. "You get it too, huh?" Rex stood, shaking the dirt from his coat before stepping out of the hollow. He sniffed the air, his instincts sharpening as he turned toward the trees. There was food out there. They just had to find it. The boy followed. The fight for survival. The struggle for food was harder than Rex had anticipated. They had searched the forest for hours, moving carefully through the underbrush, their steps quiet but desperate. Rex had picked up scents, faint trails of rabbits, stale hints of berries, old carcasses left behind by larger predators, but nothing fresh, nothing edible. The boy was slow. His legs shook when he walked too long, his hands gripping his stomach as hunger gnawed at him. His face had taken on a pale, almost sickly look. Rex's concern grew. Then, finally, salvation came. Near the edge of the forest, where the trees began to thin and the sky opened wider, Rex's nose caught something new. A different scent. Smoky, greasy, rich with the promise of food. A cabin. It sat nestled between the trees, small but sturdy, smoke curling from its chimney. The smell of meat filled the air, and Rex's stomach twisted painfully. The boy sucked in a breath. "Is that someone's house?" Rex crouched low, creeping closer. His ears flicked forward, listening. The house was still, the curtains drawn. A porch wrapped around the front, stacked with chopped firewood. And there, on a rickety wooden table near the porch steps, was a plate. A plate of food. It wasn't much, just scraps, bones picked clean but still covered in bits of meat. But to them, it was everything. The boy hesitated. "We can't just take it." Rex wasn't listening. His hunger was too great. With silent steps, he darted forward. He leapt onto the porch, grabbed the largest bone in his jaws, and bolted. The plate rattled. A door creaked. Rex's heart pounded. The boy gasped. "Run!" Behind them, a voice rang out, deep, sharp, startled. "Hey!" Rex and the boy ran. The forest swallowed them once more, their breath coming in gasps, their legs burning. They didn't stop until the cabin was far behind, until the only sound was the wind and the pounding of their own hearts. Then, finally, they collapsed. The boy panted, laughing breathlessly. "You're insane," he whispered. Rex gnawed at the bone, his tail wagging. The boy wiped his forehead, then reached forward, scratching gently behind Rex's ears. "Thanks," he murmured, "for all of this." Rex leaned into the touch. They had survived another day, together. The wind had settled into a quiet hum, weaving through the trees as the first hints of evening crept into the sky. The boy sat with his back against a thick tree trunk, his fingers absent-mindedly stroking Rex's fur. The German shepherd lay beside him, his body warm against the boy's thin frame, his ears twitching at every distant sound. They had survived another day. But for how much longer? Rex could sense it, the exhaustion weighing down the boy, the way his breathing had grown shallow, the quiet tremble in his limbs. He wasn't built for this. His body was failing. and Rex knew hunger. He had fought against it for days, but the boy was different. He was human, and humans were fragile. Rex lifted his head, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He needed to find something. Anything. Food, shelter, help. Something had to change. He nudged the boy gently with his nose. The boy stirred, blinking sleepily. "What?" he murmured. Rex stood and took a step forward, then another. "Come." The boy frowned but slowly pushed himself to his feet. His legs wobbled beneath him, but he steadied himself with a hand on the tree. "Where are we going?" Rex didn't answer. He just walked. The boy followed. The desperate search. They moved through the forest in silence. Rex led the way, his nose to the ground, his ears pricked for any sign of movement. The boy trailed behind, stumbling every so often but keeping up. Then, Rex froze. A scent. Faint, but fresh. Meat. His body tensed as he followed the smell, his pace quickening. The boy noticed the shift. "Did you find something?" Rex didn't hesitate. He broke into a sprint. The boy gasped, but ran after him, through the trees, over the roots, past the underbrush. Then they found it. A deer, or what was left of it. A carcass, partially eaten, left behind by a larger predator. The scent of another animal lingered in the air, something wild, something dangerous. But Rex didn't care. The meat was still fresh. It was their best chance. The boy hesitated, his face twisting in uncertainty. That's dead," he whispered. Rex didn't understand the boy's hesitation. Food was food. He stepped closer, sniffing at the exposed ribs, his tongue flicking over his teeth. Then, a sound. A low, guttural growl. Rex's head snapped up. The boy's breath hitched. What was that? The bushes shifted. The trees rustled. A shape emerged from the shadows. Large, powerful, hungry. A wolf. Rex's body went rigid. His fur bristled. His instincts screamed at him to protect, to fight, to survive. The wolf was gaunt, its ribs visible beneath a coat of thick gray fur. Its yellow eyes locked onto Rex, then flickered toward the boy. A challenge. The boy stepped back. "Rex!" Rex growled, lowering his head, planting his paws into the dirt. He wasn't going to let this happen. The wolf snarled, baring its teeth. Then, it lunged. Rex met it mid-air. They crashed into the dirt, snarling, twisting, snapping. Teeth met fur, claws raked skin. The forest filled with the sounds of battle, of survival, of two predators locked in a desperate struggle. Rex bit down hard on the wolf's shoulder. The beast yelped, recoiling, but it wasn't done. It lashed out, its teeth sinking into Rex's side. Pain. Burning. But Rex didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The boy screamed, "Stop it!" The wolf lunged again, but Rex was faster. He dodged, his muscles screaming in protest, and struck. His teeth clamped down on the wolf's throat. A final, brutal shake. And then, silence. The wolf went limp. Rex panted, his body trembling, blood dripping from his mouth. The boy stood frozen, his eyes wide, his hands clutched over his chest. Then, slowly, "Rex?" The dog turned. The boy ran to him, falling to his knees, his fingers immediately searching through Rex's fur, feeling for wounds. His hands came away stained with red. You're hurt." Rex let out a low whine, but he was alive, and so was the boy. A life-saving choice. The boy pressed his forehead against Rex's. His breath was shaky, his body still trembling from fear. "We can't do this anymore," he whispered. Rex breathed deeply, letting the boy's scent calm him. They needed to find help. He pushed himself up, ignoring the sharp pain in his side. He turned toward the boy, his eyes locked onto his. "Come." The boy sniffled. "Where?" Rex looked toward the trees, toward the distant sound of water. towards something else. The boy hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded, and together they walked. Their journey wasn't over, but now they knew they would survive. Together. The forest was eerily silent as Rex and the boy pressed forward. The fight with the wolf had left the dog wounded, his side aching with every step. The boy wasn't much better. His legs trembled from exhaustion, his breath uneven, but he refused to stop. Somewhere ahead, there had to be help. Rex didn't know where he was leading them. He only knew they couldn't stay here. Not in this wilderness, where hunger and predators lurked in the shadows. Not with the boy growing weaker by the hour. The child stumbled over a root, catching himself against a tree. "Rex!" His voice was barely a whisper. Rex turned, nudging the boy with his nose. He whined softly, urging him forward. I can't," the boy admitted. He slumped against the tree, his body sagging with exhaustion. "I'm too tired." Rex let out a small whimper. He understood. His own body screamed for rest, his wounds burning like fire, but they didn't have a choice. Then, a sound, distant but unmistakable. Water. A river. Rex's ears perked up. Water meant life. Water meant people. He nudged the boy again, more forcefully this time. The boy looked at him with bleary eyes. "What?" Rex turned his head toward the sound. The boy listened, his eyes widened. "Water." That single word gave him the strength to push forward. Step by step, they moved toward the sound. The closer they got, the louder the rush of water became. It was fast-moving, strong. Rex could smell the dampness in the air, the scent of wet earth and moss. Then, finally, they saw it. A river, wide and fierce, cutting through the landscape like a silver ribbon. The boy exhaled sharply, relief flooding his tired face. He stumbled forward, nearly collapsing at the river's edge. His hands cupped the icy water, bringing it to his cracked lips. He drank greedily, the water cooling his parched throat. Rex lowered his head and lapped at the river. The water soothed his dry mouth, numbing the pain in his body. For a moment they simply existed there, two lost souls, bound by survival. Then, footsteps. Rex's head snapped up. The boy stiffened. "Did you hear that?" Rex growled low, his ears pricked forward. The bushes across the river rustled. Something was moving toward them. The boy's eyes darted to Rex, fear creeping into his expression. "Is it another wolf?" Rex stayed tense, his muscles coiling, ready to fight again if needed. Then a voice. "Hey, who's there?" Rex's body went rigid. The boy gasped. A man emerged from the trees on the other side of the river. He was dressed in a thick jacket, a rifle slung over his shoulder. His expression was cautious, but not unkind. The boy sucked in a sharp breath. "Help!" he croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes widened as he stepped closer. "Kid, what the hell are you doing out here?" His gaze flickered to Rex, then to the boy's torn clothes, his pale, shivering frame. Jesus Christ. The boy swayed on his feet. His lips parted as if to speak, but instead he crumpled. Rex lunged forward, catching the boy's shirt in his teeth before he hit the ground. The man cursed, quickly stepping into the river. The water barely reached his knees as he crossed to their side. "Hey, kid, stay with me," he said, kneeling beside the boy. He pressed his fingers to the boy's throat, checking for a pulse. His face tightened with concern. Then his gaze flickered to Rex. "You're not gonna bite me, are you, boy?" Rex didn't move. He simply stood there, his body tense, his eyes locked onto the man. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the man reached into his jacket, pulling out a granola bar. He unwrapped it and held it out. "Here," he said. "For the kid." Rex hesitated. Then, slowly, he took the bar in his teeth and dropped it beside the boy. The man exhaled. Smart dog. He carefully lifted the child into his arms. The boy let out a faint groan, but didn't wake. "Let's get you both out of here." Rex followed. A new beginning. The house was warm. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the cabin with golden light. The smell of soup and fresh bread drifted through the air, replacing the scent of damp earth and fear. Rex sat beside the couch, his eyes locked onto the boy. He was safe now. Wrapped in a thick blanket, his wounds cleaned, his body finally at rest. The color had returned to his cheeks, and his breathing had steadied. The man, his name was Henry, watched from the kitchen. "He'll be okay," he said, pouring a cup of coffee. "Kid just needs some food and rest." Rex didn't move. He couldn't. Not until the boy woke up. Minutes stretched into hours. Then, a soft mumble. Rex's ears perked. The boy stirred, his eyelids fluttering. Then he turned his head, his gaze landing on Rex. "Rex?" His voice was hoarse but steady. Rex thumped his tail. The boy smiled weakly. "We made it." Henry stepped forward. "Hey, kid, you feeling okay?" The boy blinked at him, confusion flickering across his face. Henry sighed. "You're lucky to be alive. What the hell happened to you?" The boy hesitated, his fingers tightening in the blanket. Then, quietly, he said, "They left me." Henry's face darkened. "Who?" The boy swallowed hard. "My uncle, his friend. They didn't want me anymore." A heavy silence filled the room. Henry exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand down his face. "Jesus." Then he looked at Rex. "That dog, he saved you, didn't he?" The boy nodded. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "He never left me." Henry knelt beside Rex, studying him carefully. His gaze softened. "You got a good heart, boy." Rex stayed still, his body tense. Then, Henry reached forward, slowly, carefully, and ran a hand through Rex's fur. Rex didn't pull away. "You're staying with us," Henry said firmly. "Both of you." The boy let out a choked breath. His fingers reached for Rex's fur, gripping it like a lifeline. "Okay," he whispered. And for the first time in what felt like forever, they weren't alone anymore. The end of one journey, the start of another. The days that followed were unlike anything Rex had known. The boy, whose name, Rex had finally learned, was Evan, grew stronger. The hollowness in his face faded. The bruises left by hunger disappeared. He laughed now. He played. And Rex? Rex had a home again. Not just a roof over his head, not just food in his belly, but a real home. One where his name was called with love, where hands touched him with kindness. He had been left behind once. But now he had a family again. And no matter what happened, he would never let them go. The storm had passed. Not just the one that had battered the forest, stealing warmth and hope, but the one inside them. The one that had left Rex and Evan wandering in the cold, abandoned and forgotten. Now they were home. The cabin was small, but to Evan it felt like a castle. The walls held warmth, the floor was sturdy beneath his feet, and the scent of fresh bread and burning wood made the air feel safe. Henry had given him a place here, a chance. And Rex had never left his side. The German shepherd lay by the fireplace, his golden brown eyes half-lidded, his ears twitching at the faintest sound. His body had healed. The gashes from the wolf attack were now scars, reminders of a battle fought and won. His fur had grown thick again, sleek and strong, no longer matted with dirt and dried blood. He was still the same warrior he had been in the forest, but here, in this cabin, he was more than that. He was home. Evan sat beside him, fingers idly running through his fur. "You know," Henry said from across the room, setting a cup of tea in front of Evan, "not many people would have survived out there." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You and that dog? You're something special." Evan looked up at him, his fingers still buried in Rex's thick fur. "I wouldn't have made it without him." Henry exhaled, shaking his head. "No, kid. You two wouldn't have made it without each other." Silence settled between them. Evan looked back down at Rex, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. The dog had saved him, protected him, given him warmth when the world had left him in the cold. And now, he had to make sure Rex was never alone again. "Henry?" Evan asked quietly. The man raised a brow. "Yeah?" Evan swallowed hard. "Can we stay here? I mean, for good?" Henry studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Kid, I wouldn't have brought you back here just to throw you out." He scratched his beard. "You're family now. Both of you." Rex's ears twitched at the words. Evan's throat tightened. Family. It had been so long since he'd had one. He turned back to Rex, his fingers tightening slightly in his fur. "Hear that, buddy?" he whispered. "We're staying." Rex let out a soft huff, his tail thumping against the wooden floor. Henry smirked. "You two are a hell of a team." Evan smiled, small but real. "Yeah," he murmured. "We are." For the first time in as long as he could remember, Evan felt something inside him loosen. The fear, the uncertainty, the ache of being unwanted. It all faded, replaced by something new. Hope. The message for everyone watching. Not all stories end in warmth. Not every abandoned soul finds a home. But this one did. Evan and Rex's journey was one of survival, of trust, of finding light in the darkest places. And just like them, there are thousands of dogs out there, loyal, loving, brave, waiting for someone to bring them home. Maybe you can be that person. Maybe there's a Rex waiting for you. Every year, millions of dogs are abandoned. Some survive, clinging to the hope that their owners will return. Others don't make it. Hunger, cold, injury. These things don't wait. But you can make a difference. Adoption saves lives. Rescuing an abandoned dog means giving them a second chance, a chance they would never have had on their own. It's not just about saving them. It's about giving them the love they were always meant to have. And sometimes, in the process, they save you too. If you've ever considered adopting, fostering, or simply helping a stray find a home, do it. There's a dog out there waiting for you. One who will never leave your side. One who will protect you, love you, and stand by you, just like Rex stood by Evan. Because the truth is, dogs don't abandon people, but people abandon dogs. Let's change that. Adopt, rescue, save a life. Because sometimes the ones we save end up saving us too.